Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The New Standard. And as always, I have my partner in crime to my left, Neal Coolong, joining me. What's happening, Neil?
Lance, it's what about 48 hours, give or take, until the legal tampering period in the NFL starts, and this is one of the busiest times of the year for people who do what I do. That's something that you meet both with a kind of apprehension and excitement as well. A lot of stuff is going to happen. A lot of people are going to be talking about how a team has changed. And perhaps some teams talking about how they got worse. But transactional news is a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, it is a very exciting time. Arguably, this is about as exciting as the season. Of course, watching games, watching players do what they do at a high level is the most exciting time of the year. But we have a special guest that's going to join us today. And so before we have him come on to talk Steeler free agency, I do want to say if you want to participate in the program, there are multiple ways in which you can do it. You can go to YouTube. The show is streaming live now. You can go to YouTube, do a search for The New Standard and Neal Coolong. Also, you can do a search for The New Standard and Lance Williams. Also, the show is available on all podcast platforms. Do a search for The New Standard and Steelers, Google, Apple, Spotify, whatever is your podcasting platform of choice. You can find the show there. And let's go ahead and get our guest on. And let's have a great conversation about the Pittsburgh Steelers and free agency. Welcome to the program, Doug. How are you?
What's up, guys? I heard special guest, and I guess special is doing a lot of work here.
Well, you are the guest, and you are special. And thank you for hopping on to the program. What we're going to do is I'm going to let Neal and Doug have the conversation primarily. So I'm going to jump out, and I'm going to moderate in the chat and try to facilitate some questions. But before I jump off, Doug, introduce yourself and give us some thoughts on some of the big transactions this week. Just your general thoughts on Rodgers and Russell before we hop into the Steelers discussion.
Sure. Well, I'm Doug Farrar, NFL editor for USHA Sports Media Group and Touchdown Wire. I work for that guy, and happily so. The Rodgers thing, not a surprise. That's him running away from home and getting to the end of the street and coming back. And we're going to see that about 17 more times in the Pat McAfee show in the next 3 years. And we're all looking forward to that. Oh, wait, no, we're not. The Wilson thing, I'm a Seattle guy. I was covering the Seahawks on the beat at Russell Wilson's his rookie minicamp. So I'm kind of familiar with it. In a general sense, without getting too into the weeds, I kind of think the Seahawks got fleeced. And I think when the Deshaun Watson deal happens and somebody gives up 3 firsts and premium players as opposed to Noah Fant and Shelby Harris and Drew Lock, I don't know. I think this was Pete Carroll drawing a line in the sand saying, this is the team I want. This is the quarterback I want. You're not it. And Russell Wilson saying, look, I want to be a decision maker in personnel. I want to be a decision maker in game plan. I think Tom Brady going to the Buccaneers and bringing in Gronk and doing what he did and saying yeah, Bruce, it was your offense. Now it's kind of mine. I think that changed the parameters at the quarterback position, the premium quarterback position in a lot of ways. And I think Stafford sort of multiplied that. So with Wilson, you got a situation where there were times when he wasn't allowed in the room when they were game planning at times. He wanted this offensive lineman or that the one good offensive lineman they've had in the last, say, 10 years is Dwayne Brown. That was Wilson's shit. Dwayne Brown was the guy Wilson wanted. That wasn't Tom Cable or Pete Carroll saying, hey, let's go get Dwayne Brown. So this was irreconcilable differences for a long time. The Seahawks have drafted horribly for the last 5 or 6 years. The Jamal Adams deal is something that could break a team for a good 3 or 4 more years. They needed picks. Now, if they turn around and give up those picks for Deshaun Watson, I say, okay, you're all going to get fired. But it at least puts Seattle in a place where they can rebuild. And I wrote about this last week on Touchdown Wire. The question is, do you want to entrust the rebuild to the same guys, Pete Carroll and John Schneider, who forced it?
Yeah,
And
that's a good question.
that's a legit question at this point.
That's a good question. Thank you for that. And before I hop out of here, the only thing I want to say about Patrick McAfee is I hope he puts on long sleeves. Because I'm tired of seeing his arms every time I look at the podcast. So I hope he puts on long sleeves. But I'm gonna hop out and I'm gonna let you guys get to it. And I'm gonna hop onto the live chat and try to get some questions going. So thank you, Doug, again for spending your morning with the show and hopping on and giving us some great content and information.
Thanks, Lance.
Definitely, and just so everybody knows, Lance has also told Pat McAfee to get off his lawn. So
As we all should.
we'll update you on his apparel choices on our next show of the new standard. Doug, again, to echo what Lance had said, thank you for joining us. We know it's pretty early out there for you in Seattle. And I wanted to stick with Seattle for a little bit. You made your comments on Russell Wilson. I think that's interesting to suggest they may have gotten fleeced in that deal. I think really a lot of what we are discussing right now with the quarterback market in the NFL is a market of one, maybe two teams. All these deals are going to be different, even if the baseline deal is kind of being set by one of them, just simply because they're all different. They all have different things that they're bringing. They all have different things that are, going to be seen as baggage. And I think you know who I mean when I say that. As far as the Steelers go, just to touch on that really quickly, it has been reported by Aaron Wilson, among other people, that the Steelers will not make an effort to acquire Deshaun Watson, at the very least not in this soon-to-be free agency period. I don't think that is an incredible surprise, considering everything that comes with it. And it is pretty substantial. Whoever it is that does acquire Watson will certainly have to give up quite a bit, and they'll be taking on quite a bit as well in terms of that baggage. I can't find a better, more down-the-middle phrase to use to describe it, but I do know that along with his contract, is pretty substantial. So we'll keep you updated if something does break on that. And I would honestly expect if Watson will be traded, I'm pretty sure it's going to be within the next 24 to 36 hours. So stick around to us for that. But as far as the Steelers are concerned, Doug, and obviously that is the only team we care about, and it's the only team we should care about. Another Seahawks legend that I wanted to get into was this seems to be kind of quiet around the league as far as the conversation, at least up until about an hour ago, when it sounds like Dallas may or may not be getting involved with linebacker Bobby Wagner. But when I look at Wagner, I see certainly one of the best linebackers of this generation. I think one of the best overall defensive players of this generation. And I don't see a player who's really slowed down. I think he is the quintessential and cliche cap casualty, which I think is more fitting for where he is in his career. Seattle's looking to just kind of gut everything down to the studs and start over. Wagner is not being cut for a lack of ability or even really his contract, in my opinion. No. What do you think about the chances of Pittsburgh acquiring him now as a free agent? Do you think he is a fit within the Steelers defense? Do you think it might be a salary situation? You got to think there are a couple teams that would be interested in him, right?
Yeah, no question. And the thing about Wagner, I'm looking at I want to get the weight right. 6 foot 245. He's going to be 32 in June. The thing about Seattle's defense, you'll hear people say, oh, Wagner isn't what he used to be. The thing about Seattle's defense last year, it was a lot of spot drop. It was a lot of like, we're going to run the Legion of Boom schemes without the Legion of Boom. And you can guess how that worked out. They took Jordan Brooks, the linebacker, with, I believe, the 27th overall pick in 2020. And a lot of their defensive problems last year came about because they were trying to double down on mistakes they made, i.e. the Jamal Adams trade. And I don't want to hear from the Jamal Adams stands. It was a mistake to give up 2 first-round picks for a 220-pound Will linebacker.
He has stands.
Trust me, he does.
Wow.
Yeah, he does. It's bad. So anyway, long story short, that defense didn't work. They were trying to turn Brooks into the next Bobby Wagner as far as role and fit, and that's not really who he is. He's more get to the run fit without knowing what the run fit is thing, and we'll hope it works out well. I went back and watched Wagner specifically in my notes, can still kill run fits and take away short and intermediate stuff over the middle. If you're running a crosser and a 54 is there, you're going to get dunked. You're going to get deflected. You're going to get intercepted. Sneaky good blitzer, always has been. Not, I would say, as far as speed and movement ability, is probably 85% of what he was in his prime, but his prime was Hall of Fame. So that's pretty good. Not your optimal choice if you want a couple of 230. If you want Levante David and Devin White, maybe he's not your guy because he's not going to drop, 25 yards downfield. He's not Micah Parsons. He's not going to cover Kenny Stills up the seam for 30 yards.
He's 32.
Right. But if you want a linebacker who can set the tone near the line of scrimmage, depending on price and length of contract, which you don't know, he could be an asset anywhere. He's your green dot guy from day one. From an intelligence, temperament, and personality perspective, Mike Tomlin, with all the linebacker issues they've had since what unfortunately happened to Ryan Shazier, Mike Tomlin would probably have to be restrained from kissing him right on the mouth. I mean, it would be great for Pittsburgh to get him. The question is, what's the contract? What's the interest and all that? Not that tackles mean everything with linebackers, because there are a lot of linebackers who kind of hang around the field and collect tackles, as you know. Since 2002,
they aren't on the Steelers.
Oh yeah,
I don't even have those linebackers right now.
Yeah, Levante is the only guy with more solo tackles, and Wagner's 819. Nobody has more combined tackles, and Wagner's 1,383. That's a pretty good encapsulation. That's not including the playoffs, by the way, which, believe it or not, Seattle used to get to. It's a pretty good encapsulation of who he is as a player. Always near the ball because he understands your offense as well or better than you do. When you put him on the field, you get a plus physical player. You get a plus processor, leader, captain. He's that guy from day one. When he walks in the locker room, you get better. And that's going to be true for the next 2 or 3 years.
So the multi-plus leader is really what I would value, probably more than anything else if I'm the Steelers.
And really, at this point in his career, that's his best attribute, and it's a major attribute in his case.
Now, it's one attribute you might not pay for a whole lot. And I think we see that quite a bit within the NFL. They're not going to pay simply for leadership. He's going to, if he's a green dot guy, he's got to be a 900-plus snap player. And I feel like we're getting a lot of comments in our chat in regards to Joe Schobert and the role perhaps that he played. They acquired him, as you probably remember, in the preseason, and he got the green dot the second he came off the plane. And to one extent, I think some of that was related to Devin Bush and the lack of progress that they must have seen. I'm not even joking. That trade broke literally just as Bush was getting beat in coverage and missing a tackle in a preseason game. It's like Schobert was on his way even before the play was called. So not that you would look at Joe Schobert as necessarily an upgrade to that, but you hope to get maybe more out of him as well. And there are issues with the Steelers' defensive line that I think is fair to bring into account. But here's what I would say. When Bobby Wagner walks into that locker room, when he walks onto that field, you've got a different team. And to me, Steelers have the money. You made a significant investment as far as coaching your linebackers by bringing in Brian Flores. You're not messing around. I think if they do anything, if they are rumored to be connected to interest on any player, it should be Bobby Wagner.
Well, here's the thing. Tomlin's head, Flores' head, whoever is coaching that defense's head, Bobby Wagner takes it on the field immediately. If the Steelers sign him, he will walk off the plane with the playbook in his hand, and he will have studied it to the letter. That's just who he is.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that at all. I like you know my stance on this, just to refresh everybody in the audience as well. I would not go as far as to say the salary cap is a myth, because it is a thing. We know that, but the ability to work around it makes it more of a speed bump as opposed to a speed limit. And right. I don't think the Steelers, in the situation that they're in, never go into a free agency period with the amount of salary cap space that they have right now, which is plus or minus, call it 28 million to 30 million, somewhere in there. That's before any moves that they've made. I didn't factor in the signing of Miles Killebrew. I forgot to mention that as well. They signed special teamer and backup safety Miles Killebrew to a 2-year, $4 million deal. So clearly their cap is destroyed after that. They've got plenty of space to work with here. They're going to sign somebody. Okay. The second that Joe Hayden was available, they were boarding a plane or a bus to Cleveland to go sign him. I honestly think that Wagner's market is going to be similar to that, and we're going to hear the Steelers connected to it soon. If that's not a big money guy that they bring in, they're going to sign somebody. This is a team that spends the cap. They do that intentionally, plus or minus 6, 7, 8 million, in operating expenses for the season. They're going to spend up to the cap. So Bobby Wagner to me is the best fit that's available since he was released in Seattle. One player though, Doug, that the Steelers are looking like they're going to lose next season is fifth year safety Terrell Edmonds, the first round draft pick of the team back in 2018. Player that started off probably pretty slow in Pittsburgh, drew the ire of pretty much all fans after he was drafted and after sort of a not really all that good of a rookie season. The thought on him by and large is he's come on a bit more. He's a reliable player. He's on the field often. He's a good athlete, not the greatest safety in the league, not terrible either. I firmly believe they were right on the fence about whether or not they wanted to pick up his option at $6.5 million. They ended up declining it, which doesn't surprise me, considering the team had also acquired safety Minkah Fitzpatrick after
they put the option on Minkah, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, okay. They're so going. If you're choosing between the two, Minkah at 10.6 or Edmonds at 6.5, nobody is taking Edmonds. Okay. Right. So I can see why they might do that. If Minkah isn't there, maybe they keep him. I think they would probably have liked that. I think they honestly want to keep him now. It's just 6.5 might have been just a little bit too high for him. Out on the market, I don't know if he doesn't get 6.5 somewhere in there. I'm not 100% convinced of that. One report, though, I'm not sure if you have seen this, suggests the Steelers are perhaps taking a look at Buccaneers safety Jordan Whitehead, a fourth-round pick from the same class, who's probably had a little bit more career accolade at this point than Edmonds has. Not quite the athlete. I believe they're roughly, I think Whitehead's a little bit lighter, but they're roughly the same size. And Whitehead plays the run, I think, a little bit more aggressively than Edmonds does. What do you think the Steelers should do? And what do you think that the market value is for each of those players?
Well, the thing with Edmonds, and this must be an Edmonds family trait because his brother's kind of the same guy in Buffalo. He's a big, rangy, ridiculous athlete with traits that just popping off of him. It took him a while to figure it out. And I don't know him. I don't know if it was a contract year thing, like halfway through the season, the light went on and he said, oh boy, I better, get myself together if I want to make more than vet minimum. But from week 10 through the wild card round last year, he gave up 9 catches on 16 targets for 68 yards, no touchdowns, an interception, and an opponent QBR of 40.6. By the way, in that same time, Minkah's opponent QBR allowed something like 10 because he's Minkah. So I went, when I, and you know this because we discussed this, when I see stats like that, I go back to the tape. And I understand why the Steelers didn't pick up his option because he was sort of, the athleticism with some players, it gets in the way. It's like you're so athletic, you think you can do everything. I think the light that went on for Edmonds halfway through the season was I have to control my base of operations. And especially in the wild card loss to the Chiefs, I'm watching him against Kelsey and I'm watching him defend screens and cope against the run. And all of a sudden, he's developed what I call match feet, which is wherever you go, I go. And I'm right there. And I'm in control. And I'm confident in what I'm doing. If that's the Edmonds that's now going to be the player going forward, I would take him over Whitehead with in a really decisive hurry. I think Whitehead is a good player. I think that Edmonds, whether size, I don't know. Edmonds plays bigger. He's a bigger, rangier athlete and a more aggressive tackler, more physical potential. He stopped. What I wrote is after watching him, he stopped playing over his skis. He got his body under control and developed match feet. If I were deciding between Edmonds and Whitehead, I'd go with Edmonds on a shorter term deal based on the overall improvement because I think it's sustainable. I don't know that he's going to be that guy all the time, but when you see that game after game after game for half a season, it's like, okay, if somebody had 3 interceptions against Sam Darnold, who cares? But when you see it play after play over a sustained 2 or 3 month period of time, you go, okay, he always had the athletic potential. and the acumen either comes up to catch up with it or it doesn't. And I think in Edmonds' case, it kind of did. So if I were in charge, I would go Edmonds over Whitehead pretty decisively.
That's interesting. I think the question that I had, I posed this on Twitter as well, at Neal Coolong, if you guys want to check it out. It was a couple days ago. I think it's a fair question. If we were to set the baseline market for a safety at $6.5 million, now I'm saying that because that's the value of a non-Pro Bowl high snap player on his 5th-year option for 2022. In other words, that's the option amount for Edmonds as determined by the NFL. That's not an official market number, but it is the only real number that's out there. So if we are going to use that as the comparable number, like I said before, I'm not sure if Edmonds is above or below that. I do know, however, just because this is how things work, if he has more than one suitor in the open market, he's going to get over that. They're going to have to everyone's going to use that as a baseline. And if there are multiple people, it's going to go up. Whether they start at 6.5 or 6, it's going to go above 6.5 if there's multiple people. What you said that really interested me was the idea of a shorter term contract. I wonder if a team would look at maybe like a 3-year deal, total valuation, $21 million overall. So an APY of $7 million a season. Would they do that on a short deal, pay him for year 1 and year 2 and kind of leave year 3 up to see where he is? Injuries eventually are going to come in to affect any safety. And I think that's what the market sees now.
Yeah, because here's the other thing about it. And I've talked with a lot of people in the last few weeks about the safety position and whether people think it's a premium position or not. I don't think there's any question that it is in today's NFL. When you have safeties who work together, like Minkah and Edmonds did in the second half of the season, that adds an attendant, not even intangible value, because you can see it on tape and you can see it in the stats. When they work together like that, that's something you'd want to push forward to me.
I would agree with that. I think also that this is another feather in the cap of the idea of keeping Edmonds. I legitimately think the Steelers would want to keep Edmonds. It's going to be a price issue, and you got to look at it like this as well. Whatever they do with Edmonds, Minkah is taking that and tacking on 30%.
Well, of course.
Their decision right now proves that. I mean, 10.6 for Minkah, yes. 6.5 for Edmonds, no. What that means is I've got 40% on this guy. So you give him 7. Hey, what does that mean for me? I like the idea of 11, 12 plus premium for who I am on top of everything else. Minkah needs to get to that 17, 18 million a year range. And that's what he's going to want.
He's a premium deep third safety. So that's a whole different building.
Yeah, and add the two of those things together, you're looking at a back end of your defense that's young, that's athletic. Edmonds, if he continues to improve, maybe he makes a few more plays, but maybe he's also the guy that's protecting the back end to make sure Minkah can move around the way that he did a lot more in 2021 compared to what he had done previously in 2 seasons in Pittsburgh. So you look at that, you like the idea of locking them all up, but you're talking 25 million probably between the two, and that's going to go up from there. So 3 years down the line, you've got a pretty expensive decision to make, probably. Do you need those two over these 2 seasons? Can you get away with somebody else? Ask the community what you guys think of the team retaining Terrell Edmonds, something like 6.5 a year. It's probably the offer Pittsburgh is going to make is clearly going to be in that range somewhere. Don't quote me on it, but 6 is probably what I would go with if we look at it average per year over a 3 or 4 year deal.
If they can get him for that, the way he worked in that defense in the second half of the season, you then hypothesize that it is sustainable into the next 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
The importance of having that safety duo. You show me a good defense that doesn't have at least one good safety, keep going.
Because look at a team that's given up 32 points a game and probably 390 passing yards a game and get crushed in the red zone. It's a critically important position. This is a big part of why you're seeing the evolution of the game go almost like it's going from the front to the back and then the back toward the front again, and it's landing in the middle somewhere. So you have these hybrid players. You mentioned, not to bring up the name Jamal Adams again, but Seattle trades a boatload for a really small linebacker. It's essentially what they did. And the value, I'm not at all endorsing the move that they made, but from their perspective, what they're looking at is a defensive back who can play at the line. The versatility of that helps you combat sub packages. I don't think Edmonds is Jamal Adams in terms of his physicality, in terms of his athleticism, but he's a player that can play a lot of different places. So I think there is value there to that. If it's not Jordan
you need
Whitehead,
a guy, when you show too high in today's NFL, you are eliminating a lot of passing concepts, and the stats bear this out. Teams are far, 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 far better against single high in the passing game than too high. So what do? You run the ball. Well, if you have a guy who can come, tanking and crashing down to get that linebacker 5 yards out, then maybe you don't need the Staley Fangio stuff where it's too high all the time. Well, you need that big, dump truck up front. Well, maybe not as much if you can have a guy who can crash down. That's what the Seahawks hoped. In a larger sense, I wouldn't say that Edmonds is a deep third. He plays from the deep third and he can come down, and he can come down quickly. I go back to what I said about him sort of developing match feet, which is where you go, I go. And I saw that really improve in the second half of last season. I don't think you'll lose that necessarily. I don't think you can just develop that because, oh gosh, it's a contract year. I would be interested. The Steelers a lot better than I do. I haven't read Tomlin's transcripts over the last half of the season. If he addressed how Edmonds sort of got it, but he got it. And once a guy gets it like that, why would you lose him? If you can afford it, and if it's reasonable in the whole structure of the cap.
Yeah, that's the tricky part. I've said this since last year when they declined the option. I don't think this is a question of what they feel about him as a player. In other words, they declined Artie Burns' option, which wasn't much of a surprise. Well, I legitimately think the Steelers felt they don't want to. I
know you were heartbroken about that, weren't you?
Yeah, exactly.
You love Neal loves him some Artie Burns. I know.
Still bitter. I still get teary-eyed when I hear our songs. But if in Edmonds' case, they didn't want to set the floor at $6.5 million, but they did want to retain him, and I legitimately feel like they still do. And I think they're negotiating now. We'll see what they come up with. If that is not an option, though, because for the same reasons we would want Pittsburgh to keep him, who's to say there's not somebody out there willing to give him 8? Pittsburgh isn't going to do that. What else would you see besides Jordan Whitehead? I believe it was Andrew Filipponi who said the Steelers would be interested in taking a look at Whitehead should he reach free agency. Do you see any other safeties available in the market you think could fit with Pittsburgh in the role that Edmonds is playing?
I'm looking at, the box slot. Oh, God, Daniel Sorensen. No. Matthews out of your range. McCourty, short term. Marcus Williams, too expensive. Marcus May is more of a deep third guy. Quandre is more of a deep third guy. And per Seattle, no one else can have him. Keanu Neal might be interesting as sort of a slot backer guy.
I think he was a guy the Steelers were interested in, too, back in the day. Keanu Neal, somebody I've seen.
Jabril Peppers, if you know how to use him. Tashawn Gibson, I think, was a bit underrated over the last couple of years. And there are a few guys out there. There's no one the obvious would be Matthew, who was sort of the Minka prototype for a while. And, in Alabama and Miami, where you're playing, 12 different positions and just balling out all over the place. A Kareem Jackson, maybe Keanu Neal. Again, I'll mention that name again. I think Edmonds is their best option at that position. By position, I say you play, because when I look at defensive backs, I look at where do you start and where do you finish? Like, what's your primary? Because everyone plays all over the place now. No one plays just one spot. So I kind of go from out to in. In this, where you're playing box, 2 slot, 2 free. That's 1, 2, 3 in order of importance and ability. For price, because you ain't going to get the Badger and you ain't going to get Marcus Williams, he's probably your best option. Plus the fact, again, he fits in that defense. He and Minka already work well together. That to me is worth $3 million. Just that.
I agree, and I think Pittsburgh does as well, which is why that was in the plus side for me as far as picking up his option. you want to pay for continuity. You want to pay for the guy the coaches know. At that point,
well, and I understand why they didn't pick up his option before, because the year he was still kind of that cat on the kitchen floor. He didn't really pick it up to me until that second half of the season, which good for him, but it also made it more complicated. You don't always expect that. And when it happens, you go, okay, now we have to rejigger and kind of, how do we capitalize on this as a team? And for Edmonds, how do I capitalize on it as a player?
Yeah, I think this dovetails a bit into not the same type of situation, but let's look at it more internally from the inside out and move to the offensive line. You have no doubt been around the Steelers fans long enough to understand the frustration and general bitterness toward then rookie center Kendrick Green. And looking at where the Steelers are going and what they are trying to do, it looks to me like Green was kind of a black hole. Now, I'll offer this up. In my eyes, from what I saw, he was really slow to snap and take on a block. I think that's a fatal flaw of a center, and there isn't much of a difference there. I don't know how fixable that is. I think you can work with it, but there are a lot of things you can't do if he's unable to do that. So new offensive line coach Pat Meyer comes in. I'm sure part of the interview process was, what do you want to do with the center? How do we do this? Within the draft, I've seen this a couple times. It wasn't your mock draft, but I have seen Iowa's Taylor Linderbaum fall to 20. I have heard a lot of very negative things about him at 20. I've heard a lot of very positive things about him at 20. It really seems more like
besides the fact that he's a center, what would the negative thing be?
It's not the biggest. He's kind of scheme specific. You got to move him a bit. Are the Steelers built for that fundamentally? Do they want to run outside zone?
That's the other, like the new offensive, and the Steelers switch this like every year. Are they gap or are they inside outside zone? I mean, every team plays all of it, but like, what's your predominant thing?
What's your fastball? And for the Steelers, that's been gap and inside zone.
If it's beat the crap out of you gap, maybe you take Zion Johnson, move him to center, which he's played before. And he's at, not that phone booth exists anymore, but
does it take him a full second to snap the ball and take on a block? Because that was Green's problem.
Here's what I wrote about Green. And people remember your last plays more distinctly than anything else. And you remember this, that one of his last plays before he was out for whatever reason, whether it was injury or whatever, the week 16 sack fumble against the Chiefs, Tershawn Wharton just blew right by him. And Tershawn Wharton is not, he's a good player, but he's not like Aaron Donald. And it was pretty quickly after that they put J.C. Hassenpfeffer, whatever his name is instead. I will give Green
Minnesota's own J.C. Hassenpfeffer.
Yeah, I will give Green credit for getting on field and tackling Jaron Reed, who I'll mention later in the show, preventing a touchdown. If that switch wasn't injury related, and I've read on Steelers Wire after using the Google that it may or may not have been, I don't know.
We've debated that in this segment. For those who might not know what we're talking about, Kendrick Green missed, I believe, the week 16 and 17 games.
No, he was in week 16. And
was it 17 and 18 he missed? And I thought he came back for the last one.
No, it was the last drive, and all of a sudden, number 60 is playing center. I'm like, that's interesting.
I feel my long-winded point here. I'll cut it off short. I feel both of those things can exist. I refuse to believe when Adrian Clem left, that's when Kendrick Green wasn't playing anymore, and that's when you started the team have a little bit more continuity on offense. And you're talking about J.C. Hassenauer is the least physically gifted center in the entire NFL. I promise you that. The guy is short. He's stubby. He's not overly strong. He's not overly fast. He knows what he's doing, though, and he can get the snap off and get into a block.
His right, and prevent a guy from demolishing your quarterback.
That's that was the difference between it. And it's amazing to the point where I would counter with this. I'm sorry, I've gone way past my question here, but if you look at a guy like Linderbaum, if he can do that, that in and of itself has far more intrinsic value to the offense than whatever Kendrick Green provided last year. Is it what you should do at center if you're getting run from an undrafted backup who didn't even play in college? If you're getting more run out of that guy than you are in Kendrick Green, I don't think you need 20 overall to fix it. I think you really should be able to go back in the third round and find somebody that can play the center position. Why they scouted Green the way they did, I don't know. The tape just doesn't show that he's really, he should be out there. Certainly not that early in his career.
I live in Seattle, Neal, so I've seen over the last decade the worst offensive line scouting in the history of football at any level, going down to Pop Warner. I'll answer the overall center question this way. I don't know if you saw or heard or read any transcript of Eric DaCosta's combine interview session with the
I
media.
did not.
He compared Linderbaum to Marshall Yanda. If the Steelers want Linderbaum, they may have to jump Baltimore to get him. Because
really? I've seen him linked to Baltimore quite a bit.
That's
that absolutely
point
makes a ton of sense for what they do. He might be Baltimore's best option at 14.
Exactly. Like take a more powerful Jason Kelsey, which is my comp for Linderbaum, and put him in that offense. Holy crap.
He's perfect for it.
Yes, he is. So with the Steelers, you're like, okay, well, we'll obviously get into this more when we talk about quarterbacks or whatever, but what was the offense last year? How much of it was defined by Ben's limitations, by the offensive line problems, by a new running back getting up to speed? What do they really want to do? I don't.
Their offense last year, Doug, was Ben's limitations. I think that was the name of it inside the building. They couldn't do anything.
It was RPO in a can.
Yeah, they tried to do RPOs. They failed at it. They tried to do other stuff and couldn't. They couldn't do anything consistently except run short slants under max protection, 3-step, get rid of the ball. The only thing they excelled at top to bottom was getting rid of the ball.
Yeah, fourth down screen game, primo. Yeah, but as far as center,
I forgot it, but that's a low blow. I forgot about that. Was it the same game or was it different weeks? The same situation. They screwed up fourth down.
It was every flipping week.
To be honest, it was worse in 2020. So it really was. I think they converted 0 of 16 short yardage situations in the second half of the year, something like that.
Well, I was watching the Edmonds tape, and I put up that, which you saw because you responded to it, the Andy Reid screen to McKinnon where he did that little slash thing, and Joe
Edmonds had no choice. What do you want Edmonds to do? And there's nothing Edmonds could do there.
I said, as always, put Andy's screen game in the Louvre, and someone said put Mike Tomlin's screen game in the latrine, and I said, well, blame Canada, as we know.
Blame Fickner, blame Haley.
Yeah,
they haven't been able to run a screen since Randall L. I swear.
When we talk about the offensive line, you then burn that out to what the quarterback's going to be. Because I've done 2 mocks this year. I've put Matt Corral in Pittsburgh in both of them because the criticism of Matt Corral is all he can do is throw RPOs. Not true. He's actually better when he doesn't. But if your best bet is to go to an RPO and a can offense, hey, there you go. But we don't know what that offense is actually going to be because we don't know who the quarterback is. I don't assume it's either Rudolph or Haskins. So when it comes to and I don't know what the new O-line coach is going to run because, again, the Steelers are really, from year to year, very different in what they prefer to do with their blocking schemes. So you have a Cam Beef Jurgens, maybe he's the guy in the later rounds. Fortner from Kansas, I think. They're different types of guys. Do they need a new center? Yeah. And whether that's free agency, like a Ryan Jensen, that's spendy. They had Pouncey for a long time, and sorry, Steelers fans, they rolled with that even when Pouncey had lost his fastball for a couple of years. So they value that consistency.
It goes back to that $3 million extra that you would pay for the guy that that was Pouncey in a lot of ways.
Right.
And Pouncey was a locker room team leader guy. It wasn't that he was the best center in the game. Pouncey was that locker room. Just for fans who are curious, Maurkice Pouncey was on Ben's level as far as influence. I know that because at that point I was a reporter. I was covering the team. When Pouncey showed up and it looked like he was going to talk to media, everybody stopped. The players came and listened to what Pouncey had to say. He had major pull in that locker room. He's a really likable guy. He was a great leader. They paid the premium for that. And
that goes back
for
to
them that works out. But yeah, you never
goes back to
met
the Wagner discussion, right? How much is that worth? Is it worth it for $2 or $3 million?
You need that pod boss, in my opinion.
If you don't have that guy, yes, it is.
you'll know when you don't have him too.
Oh,
and if we're talking about, come on, deck chairs in the Titanic, as far as market value, up him a little bit to be motivated to do these things for the sake of the team, you're overpaying him per market. Your agent probably is aware of that. They actually countered really close to what we offered. So I think we should probably take this. Those kinds of things, the Steelers have paid for those types of veterans in the past. I feel like that's what Wagner would be. Let's get to with the quarterbacks.
And I've watched the Legion of Boom go from a room full of alphas to the beta band in a very short space of time. It's kind of depressing. So
it's really hard to get all those guys together. But the Legion of Boom is what could happen if you emphasize that. And you need leadership to do that. It is leadership. It's leadership and its attitude. I think Bobby Wagner all day. If they don't sign Bobby Wagner, I won't be happy about that. I'll tell you that right now. I wanted to get into your mock draft though, because I think it's really interesting. I wanted to go into the RPO comments that were made as far as Ole Miss quarterback Matt Corral goes. I look at Corral. I see an NFL starter. I see great makeup, great tools, great toughness. I don't see Trevor Lawrence. I think we are in kind of Trevor Lawrence hangover territory right now. If the prospect isn't 6'5", 230 with athletic ability, a cannon arm, and a golden presence, we don't value it as much until the years start to move on. I look at Corral. I absolutely see a first-round quarterback. And the fact that he fell to 20 in your mock draft really excites me. I be honest with you, I don't think that's going to happen. But if he's on the clock at 20, the Steelers got to take him, right? I mean, I don't think they would get a better realistic option at 20 than Matt Corral.
We'll see. I think, and I was discussing with Brian Baldinger a video we did yesterday, the fact that so many quarterback moves happened right after the combine, I think is indicative of what the NFL feels about this class.
Zach Wilson, last year, same thing, except now it's in reverse. You're going the other way. They're convinced on the veterans now, whereas last year, okay, we like Zach Wilson. He made that throw in his pro day. We got to get him. We're going to go trade up everything to go get him. You're right. The exact opposite.
I think it was Scott Pioli who said on the NFL Network that was the worst thing or on the Tapeheads podcast, that was the worst thing that ever could have happened to Zach Wilson was that he made that throw, because now he thinks he has to make that throw all the time.
Yep. It's just too much for everything, for all of his evaluation to go down to that one throw. And that's what happened. But hey, you know what? Chicago Bears are loving it. I'm sure Justin Fields is still pretty pissed, but short term and long term, they're going to win that. For him to have gone where he did, pretty remarkable. But
let me say this: if Fields was in this class, he'd be number one, and I think by a fairly sizable margin. Nobody
would even question it. The only thing you would see is something on Reddit from some idiot that would get downvoted into oblivion. Well, actually, I think Kenny Pickett should get taken before Justin Fields. Nobody is going to go along with that. No. Fields was, it was a great class. This one, not so much, not so sure on it. But where's the baseline of that? Because at the same time, I still see Matt Corral having a great set of skills. You know, you and I talked a lot last year about Mac Jones. I think Mac Jones is a parallel to Corral in this sense. Jones has an obvious flaw. He is about as athletic as I am. He's about as fast as I am. He's built like I am. The guy can put a ball anywhere on the field. We've seen that up and down. He's smart. He can read a defense. He's not athletic. He cannot make extra plays off schedule. He's not going to give you an added dynamic that you really expect from today's modern quarterback. What is it about Matt Corral then, would you say he does not have that it is going to limit him to be a top 20 as opposed to a top 10 pick?
Like a plus deep arm. I mean, that can be improved. He's a smaller guy. He ran a lot in that offense. You don't necessarily want that. I think for what I perceive the Steelers wanting post Ben, I think he'd be a fit. I think Pickett would be a fit. I've done more work on Pickett and Malik Willis and Ritter than I have on Corral. I don't want to sit here and bullcrap you saying I've watched 8 Corral games. I've watched highlights at this point. Because you know this, I don't start the draft process until the Super Bowl is over because I just can't. I think it's a fit from a schematic perspective if what Canada and his group want to do is in any way resembles what it was last year. Which again, you would know better than I do, but if that's who they want, get the ball out quickly. He has a good head on his shoulders. He can run the game from the pocket and outside the pocket to a pretty decent degree. Would I give him a first round grade regardless of positional overvalue? Probably not. I don't know that I give any of these guys a first round grade. Even Willis. Pickett, maybe. Pickett, to me, his floor is sub Kirk Cousins. His ceiling is plus Kirk Cousins. But that's your box. Willis could be Jalen Hurts. It could be Michael Vick, like Eagles Michael Vick, like Michael Vick when he understood the West Coast offense. And for 2 years, it was like, oh my God. And that's Colbert's final draft and that whole thing. That's going to be a big discussion in the room. Is this year we don't overcook quarterback value in the draft? And I think that conversation is being had in a lot of NFL facilities right now. And again, based on what happened right after the combine, it was like a mad dash. Carson Wentz, for God's sake.
Stop.
I think that tells you. Oh, that actually wasn't a shot. I wasn't.
Please stop. Can't take it anymore.
I know. I think teams are telling you what they feel about this class. So would Matt Corral be there at 20? Let's put it this way. Spoiler for the next mock, pre-free agency mock. I got 9 offensive linemen and 2 quarterbacks.
I want to respond to something that was said earlier. I absolutely did not compare Mac Jones to Matt Corral. What I said was Mac Jones has one obvious limitation that probably drops his stock. And I asked, because I knew what he would say, what Matt Corral's deficiency is in that regard. And it's his arm strength. So mind is blown, and so is your hearing. As far as
the thing about real quick, the thing about arm strength is you can improve it. We saw that with Brady. We saw that with Breeze. Mobility,
it's
you don't have it. That's it. And
yeah,
it's just
you can't get faster as you age. Your arm can get stronger when you use all of your body. When you put it, Twins center fielder Torrey Hunter said this once, and it's always stuck with me. When he gets his man muscles, in other words, when the quarterback grows up, he's been in an NFL nutrition program, weight training program. When he develops his lower body, when he gets legs, when he gets an ass, he's able to throw the ball. You can't get faster on that same thing. You won't, not functionally. You might shave at 100th off your 40 time, but who cares? That's not functional speed. You're able to improve the arm strength to the level that you need it. And you can also scheme around that to some degree. Mac Jones. You're able to draw stuff up based on those types of limitations.
Because I don't think Mac Jones has a great deep arm. I think we saw it in college because his receivers were nuking every cornerback in the SEC. You watched him last year. I don't know.
Limited NFL arm. Young kid, though. That's
Can
something
it improve?
to build
Yes.
on.
Will the mobility improve? No.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah.
I think Corral has
if you
those
want to
parts.
roll him out, he's fine.
I think that's the thing I see more than anything with Corral is he's not in. He's going to be. If the Steelers draft him in 2 years, they're going to be playing that type of offense. That's where the NFL is going anyway. The Steelers tried to do RPO last year often. They tried to do that a lot.
The Chiefs and the Dolphins had more RPO snaps.
Yeah. All due respect to Ben Roethlisberger, a Hall of Fame player, not real equipped for an RPO offense. No. Not his style of ball.
Never what he was. Never what he was an orchestrator. He didn't want pre-snap motion. He didn't want the coaches screwing with his vision.
Ben wanted to play backyard football.
Yeah.
And it worked and it didn't work. I mean, whatever. We're not here to critique Ben, but the fact is their offensive coordinator has a background in it. He has success in it. They've drafted players that seem like they're going to fit with that. I think Pat Freiermuth could exist pretty well inside of an RPO offense. You have a good running back who's smart with vision and feet. I think that helps.
Who can, by the way, catch the ball really well.
Yeah.
That's why I compared him to Steven Jackson when he came out. That's one of the reasons why.
I think that's fair. I think that's a good comparison. You put all that together, it looks to me like they need an RPO quarterback. Now, for me, if we're looking at it just in that lens, and answer this for me, I like Corral. I think Corral goes earlier. Sam Howell is another classically conditioned RPO type of quarterback with mobility who lacks size and that great arm. Is he good enough at 20, or is he just purely a round 2 guy in your mind?
I wouldn't put Sam Howell in the first round, even with the overcooking the position. I think he's maybe a middle second guy.
Is he a 52 overall, which is what I would project him to be?
Probably.
My opinion,
about there.
The Steelers are taking a quarterback with their first round pick or their second round pick. It seems more likely it would be the second based on how I think the draft will unfold, because I don't think Desmond Ritter's name came up as well. He's another guy I look at from an age and experience perspective. You can get something on the arm, but he's got a good arm. He's older. The accuracy, the mechanics, it's going to take a bit for him. In one way, I would say take him in the first round to get that 50-year option. If you are set today on him being your starter in 2023, beyond that, though, he's a second-round guy, and I don't think that's a bad move for them to make either.
I would put Ritter on the periphery of the first and second rounds. I like him a lot. You just don't want to watch the Alabama game, which wasn't his fault.
I like Ritter a lot, except they're not drafting at 32, and they're not going to move down to 32. Right. Ritter would be a trade-up target late in the 20s. If the Steelers were able to trade down, it's going to be with the team that's trading up to get Ritter. Somebody who's out of the first round, something.
Well, let's assume for the purposes of this exercise that instead of overcooking the quarterback position to 50% in the draft, NFL teams are going to do it 10% this year.
Is it fair to say they're overcooking it, though? There aren't any. You have to get them when they're there. It just doesn't matter, in my opinion. Yeah. You can't.
I think this could be like 2013. There were 11 quarterbacks drafted that year. EJ Manuel was the only first-round guy. Yeah. None of them panned out.
And all of
I think the only guy in the league right now, the only 2 guys in the league still are Geno Smith and Mike Glennon.
That's amazing.
And sometimes you have those classes where it's like, we got Bupkis. We can't do this. If we draft this guy around more because he's a quarterback, we're going to get fired.
Steelers fans, keep me honest here. Did the Steelers ever lose Geno Smith? I know they almost did last year, but first thought in my head when you said Geno Smith and Mike Glennon, if I was on Jeopardy, who are 2 quarterbacks who beat the Steelers that shouldn't have? I know Glennon.
Well, I gotta look that up.
I don't think Smith did. I think they beat Smith twice. Once when he was with the Jets, and then last year with Seattle.
Well, he may be your Seahawks starting quarterback in 2022.
Yeah, things are looking great for Seattle.
They've really done well. It's just so awesome up here.
Let me ask you this, Doug.
They've gone from Fair Warning to Van Halen 3. It's just bad.
David Lee Roth and Gary Sharon. It's about as bad as it gets. Let me end with this. We're up against time here. Just off the cuff, and I think this came up. If you were Kevin Colbert in your last season as general manager with the Pittsburgh Steelers, you have, let's just say let's say they sign an offensive lineman to start in free agency. Just take offensive line off the board, because I'm not sure what I like at 20 overall anyway for them, and we have to go through a lot of hoops to figure out exactly what they would want to do. If you are Kevin Colbert, you have signed an offensive lineman to start in free agency. What are you looking at today, or a week from now, after free agency has gone through? You sign the lineman, the draft is coming up. What are you looking to do if you are in charge of the Steelers? Their free agency, their spending, and their draft. What's the move that you want to make next if you were in charge of that team?
I think I have to figure out short-term what quarterback I want. And it may not be in the draft, because Willis and Ritter, I think, are a year. I think you sit Willis for a year and then he can be really good. I think Ritter's the same guy. I think Pickett maybe starts and takes his lumps for a while and then gets a little bit better. I'm not as fond of his ceiling as some people are. I think you have to figure out who your quarterback is for 2022. And maybe that's it. And maybe if it's RPO boot, it's Trubisky or it's Mariota. If it's this is for one season. This is rent a QB and hope that you can go 9-7-1 again. Not
They
really.
signed him already.
No,
They
they
have Mason Rudolph is at
No.
10,000 foot level. He's the same quarterback. There's no point in spending on. Okay, explain it to me then from a business perspective. You've got 10 million dead for Ben on the cap. Rudolph is worth 4 on the cap. You're going to tender Haskins at the highest level that's reasonable, 2.6 million. It's probably going to be the 1.5 level. Those 3 quarterbacks, you want to bring in another one?
Why
Only
would you
2 of them
Haskins?
can play. If you add a 4th to that, you have a cap situation of what, $20 million? And you don't have
What has Haskins ever done? What has Haskins ever done to
Nothing.
deserve the highest possible tender?
What's Trubisky done for the same price? What's the difference?
He has shown in the NFL an ability to succeed in boot and RPO offenses. That's the 2 things he does well. That's it.
I'll just draft the guy then. I'll just draft him.
Well, yeah.
I can draft that.
But maybe
so my 3rd quarterback, why is it going to be another veteran? You're going to draft a quarterback because then if you bring in Trubisky, are you going to give him a multi-year deal? Then he's your starter at one point. Why do you have Rudolph? You gave Rudolph a bonus last year to stay. What's the point?
That's a good question.
Why are you tendering Haskins at all?
The question is that, hey, we believe in you to X degree, or we're just doubling down on our mistakes?
I think call it a mid-level. I think they're saying it's insurance. If we can't land Rodgers, which they're rumored to have at least explored, which makes sense to me, maybe they would get a sucker deal on Rodgers, and this financially wouldn't be too hard to keep Rudolph as a backup. That'd be fine. You get the deal to keep him in place to avoid Mitch Trubisky in 2023, to avoid being leveraged by Mitch Trubisky, because you wouldn't have a quarterback under contract. They protected themselves against the market.
The water carrier is telling us now that he's going to get a 4-year, $40 million Taysom Hill deal. I don't believe it. I
Trubisky.
I think it's
Who's telling you that?
Have you read Twitter lit? Have you read the blue checks?
I read Twitter. I don't take it seriously. That's no. Oh my God.
This is what I'm saying, Neal.
You're not signing Mitch Trubisky for 4 years.
No,
why would you want him for 4 years?
This is what I'm saying. No matter what you see from the certain blue checks, and I'm not going to name names because I know some of these people.
It's just
I know what they're doing. They're agentifying.
Yeah.
He's going to get a 1-year, a little bit over vet minimum deal. Same with Mario. Yeah. Same with a Bridgewater.
Exactly. They tried to spend
none of the guy with the possible exception of Kenny Pickett. None of the quarterbacks you draft this year are going to be ready to play this year, and I have serious questions about Pickett. You're going to have to sit any of these guys. Brissett,
same guy, same 10,000 foot level. They're all the same guy. They already have him.
Brissett, I put in the Bridgewater category.
You're not bringing in a third.
Pocket guy.
There's no point.
I mean,
Bill
honestly,
Parcells, when you have 2 quarterbacks, you have none. I'd imagine the equation's the same when you have 3 quarterbacks. None of those guys are starting.
Says the guy who won a Super Bowl, Jeff Hostetler, but
that was 40 years ago. Miracle that you actually played defense and ran the ball then. Hostetler didn't screw up. That's a nice value to have. You can't do that. Certainly not with Mitch Trubisky. He's gonna screw something up. It's gonna happen.
Well, look, they're not gonna get Watson. They're not going to get Rodgers. They're not going to get Wilson. They're not going to get a premium quarterback. Anyone they draft, they're going to have to sit. Unless they're just going to take it down to the studs, which they're not going to do.
They're going to play.
They're one of those teams.
That's why they signed
one of those teams is pretty much a quarterback away. They got to fix some stuff, offensive line. They got to. I mean, we didn't even get into the whole Tuitt thing because Cam Hayward had to be Superman all year. This is a Hall of Famer, and it was wearing him out. So they got to figure that out.
Cam was gassed by the end of the season. You could
might have been his most impressive season, just from
up until he remembered he's 31 years old and he had to play balls out, and their run defense died when Cam was no longer Superman. That's not fun.
This is my opinion based on what I've seen from these guys on their roster and the ones who might be. The guys on the roster, no. The guys who they would draft would, with the possible exception of Pickett, need to sit. Do you then take the 1-year bridge guy?
Yeah, because they already did. Mason Rudolph.
Okay. You and I are going to agree. You and I are going to agree to disagree on that.
When I'm saying 10,000 foot level, I don't mean bootlegs. I don't mean any of that stuff. I mean they can do non-mobility based stuff with Mason Rudolph while they figure out who's next, because he's not. They know that, but now they don't have to enter into the market to compete for Marcus Mariota. They don't have to.
So why would you do
overpay for Marcus
non-mobility
Mariota.
based stuff with a guy who you know isn't your next quarterback? Why wouldn't you get mobility based stuff with a guy who knows who's not your next quarterback? Why wouldn't you give yourself one more advantage?
Because Trubisky on the open market, one, it's going to cost a lot more. Two, hasn't been with them for 4 years. They don't know him inside and out. They don't have any real clearance on him. Three, why would Trubisky come for 1 year? He probably wouldn't even sign for that. What contract are you going to use?
Maybe it's not Trubisky. Maybe it's a Mariota. Maybe it's a Bridgewater. It's that bridge guy. And you say they have that bridge guy. I say they don't. I mean, we can parse that out, but that to me is the thing that, going back to the original question of what beyond free agency, which unless they get one of those guys, they're not going to get someone else. What do they need to do next? They got to figure out their quarterback.
They absolutely need to figure out the quarterback. I think that that's going to be the question of the rest of this offseason and probably next offseason as well for the Steelers. But Doug, we are out of time. Thank you very much for coming by. Again, it's Doug Farrar. He is the NFL editor with the NFL Wire Network, which is the same network I work for. Doug runs our Touchdown Wire property and edits the work of Mark Schofield, Lori Fitzgerald. Fitzpatrick. You guys should definitely come by and check that out. Thanks, Doug, for appearing. Lance has reappeared from the shadows.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Doug.
Pretty much all we have here, Lance, unless you have some final parting shots.
No, I think it was a good interview. I wanted you to.
That's, by the way, every phone call that Neal and I have is we just argue about football for 3 hours.
Thank you for
at least once a week.
Definitely thank you for hopping on, Doug. One question I did want to ask, you guys spent a lot of time on Bobby Wagner. Outside of Bobby Wagner, any free agents you think out there that the Steelers could target? I would love for the Steelers to bring in Wagner, by the way. And I'm going to agree with Neal. I think it's going to be Mason Rudolph. It'd just be a bridge to whoever the guy is in 2023 or 2024. We'll see. But in terms of free agency, who would be another player outside of Wagner that you think the Steelers could target in free agency?
Jordan Hicks. Cardinals kept drafting these, supposed dual linebackers in the first round. They didn't really regard him. He's a really good player.
Excellent.
Former
again,
Eagle, I believe.
Excellent. Again, Doug, thank you for hopping on. And thank you, listeners, for hopping on as well. Great interview, great content, great information. And hopefully we'll have you back again, Doug, maybe towards the draft. We can talk some draft stuff, see what the Steelers do. And we can also talk some free agency stuff as well. But thank you again, Doug. Thank you, Neal, for handling that and giving me the week off. I could just sit back in the background and just listen to a fantastic interview. So again, thank you, Neal. And as always, listeners, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe.